Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me now. I'm so glad to be here with you. Welcome to all my storytellers out there. Happy Valentine's week to you. I hope you had a sweet Valentine's Day. I wish I could pass out chocolates through the screen. That would be really fun. But we are going to talk about something a little Valentine's theme today, and that theme is love. Isn't that great? It's always a great topic to talk about. But we're here, to talk about how to write better stories. And I want to zero in on this idea that I find really, really helpful. And it's also something I don't think I've ever talked about on this YouTube channel before. And it's a concept that I learned from a writer named Michael Shurtleff. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But it's this concept that every scene is a love scene. Every scene we write is somehow at the core of it a love scene. Doesn't that sound like a timely thing to discuss? I hope you agree with me that it is. It does mean something very significant for writers who struggle perhaps sometimes to find the real bones of structure and storytelling in the scenes that we write. And I want to just foreground this by saying that I think that finding the love in every scene is an incredibly useful discipline. And it is really the key to keeping your story moving forward with super high stakes and high engagement from the reader. And I also want to say that this is not just a useful concept for people who are writing romance. It's a useful concept for all of us. So I hope that intrigues you. And I think when we get to the end of this talk, I want to put it to you that we all might benefit from perhaps even adding a love story, an actual love story to our book. So maybe we'll talk about that by the time we get to the end. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Let me introduce myself to anyone who's new or maybe is watching the replay. I'm Mary Rose Wood. I am an author. I'm best known for writing middle grade fiction, which is a delightful type of storytelling that is designed for readers that many of us might think are too young to concern themselves with romance plots, but I am here to tell you it is not so. So I'll share some of my own experience with that today. I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform for training and mentoring writers. I offer courses. I offer a flagship program called Path of the Storyteller. It's a wonderful community. And if you want to learn more about it, you can get on my mailing list over at pathofthestoryteller.com. And in fact, so I don't forget, let me just also remind those of you who might not have heard about it yet, there's a free download over at the website. And you can just go straight here, www.pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. This is a collection of writing prompts, 30 writing prompts. And they're special writing prompts because they are designed to walk you through story structure from the beginning through the middle to the end. So if you work with these writing prompts in order, you're going to give yourself a little guide to story structure. It's a really nice way to introduce yourself to the topic if it's new to you. And if you think that you understand story structure, you might actually find some nuance in working with these 30 writing prompts. This is just a freebie. You can go and get it anytime you like, and I will include a link to it below so you can just click. All right, then. And let me also say, as ever, I'm always so pleased to welcome the folks who come live every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, or most Wednesdays, I should say, and participate. And it's so great to see you here. Hillary is here and she's already sharing some news that she's got some good work done today. I'm thrilled to hear it. And we've also got folks watching on Facebook as well as YouTube. So hello to the folks on Facebook as well. Thanks for saying hi. All right. You feeling romantic? Should I cue the mood music? Are we ready to begin? Let's do it. I want to start by talking about a loving gift that I received when I was still in high school. And I have it here. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. But as many of you know who've been either studying with me or have heard me talk or watch the YouTube channel, I talk about theater sometimes. I talk about the discipline of theatrical storytelling, about acting. And it's because I started my creative career when I was still fairly young in the theater. And when I was in high school, I wanted to go to college to study to be an actor. And in order to do that, I had to audition to get into acting programs. And so I was in high school and I was getting ready to audition. I have two wonderful brothers. My older brother was already in college. And as an act of support and his confidence in me, he gave me a gift. This is the actual book he gave me. So this is now decades old. And it's called Audition. It's by Michael Shurtleff, who was a noted casting director. And the subtitle is Everything an Actor Needs to Know to Get the Part. Isn't that a wonderful promise? It's a delightful memento, right? Because I opened it up just yesterday to prepare for today's talk, and I saw that my brother had inscribed it with encouraging words to me. This is an example of love, right? Sibling love. Really, really appreciated. But this book is terrific. And what it does, it's not a book about how to be a great actor necessarily. And it's not a book about writing, although I'm going to take this and make it, about writing for our benefit today. It is very specifically a book about how to audition. And for those of you who've never had the experience, I'm not going to say the pleasure because it's not always that fun, but the experience of auditioning, let me just tell you a little bit about what it's like. When you're an actor and you have an audition, you might have a chance to prepare. You might be given the materials in advance, but it's just as likely that you'll be asked to show up at a certain time at a certain place, or nowadays on Zoom, right, or on tape, and be handed a scene, a piece of text, maybe a couple of pages long, that you've never seen before, that is from a new play, so you've never heard of the play because nobody has. It's not yet produced. And be asked to read from it and give a performance. And this is very challenging because you may only have minutes to read it over. You may be pretty unprepared. Now, in a really sensitive audition situation, they will give you some time, but it's just not that much time, right? And so what you need to develop is a way of approaching a scene that doesn't require like months of preparation and research. You need a kind of a laser focused way to get to the heart of it quickly. And I want you to remember that, right? Because getting to the heart of scenes is very important for writers. So Michael Shurtleff's goal in writing this book was to create a framework of just quick things, questions that actors could ask quickly, like on the spot when they've just been handed a scene. And that will give them like a way to make fast, big choices about what to do when they go in there and audition using this scene. So it's pretty challenging, right? But I hope as writers, you can also already sniff out that the ability to get right to the heart of the matter, what is this scene about, is incredibly useful. Some writers who approach their work by drafting words, thinking that what the scene is about is going to reveal itself slowly in the fullness of time. Those are the people I'm really talking to today, right? Because what if you had no time? What if you just had to come up with it, right? Well, Shurtleff's first principle about how to do this is to ask this question: where is the love in this scene? Because, he argues, every scene is fundamentally a love scene. Isn't that interesting? Now, let me tell you just a little bit about how this serves actors in auditions, and then we're going to pivot to how it might serve us as writers in fiction. Let's imagine that you have two actors in a scene where the text on the page, which, just remember, in a play script is only the dialogue, right? And just as in life, characters in plays don't always say exactly what they mean. So the actor has a lot of filling in to do. Let's say the dialogue is kind of combative and makes it seem like the two characters are having an argument or don't really like each other or disagreeing about something. Now, if the actors in the scene default to making a negative choice, like for example, well, my goal in this scene is that I hate this person that I'm talking to and I wish that they would go away. And the other actor makes a choice like, oh, this person bores me and I can't wait to get out of here. Like negative choices. I'm bored with this person. I want to get away from this person. I don't like this person. That might be what the dialogue makes it sound like. But the trouble is that as an actor, I mean, actors are called actors for a reason. You have to do something. And part of what you have to do is just stay on stage and get to the end of the scene. Like that's just a basic requirement. You can't say to yourself, well, I'm deciding that my character is unhappy here and I don't like the other character in the scene and I'm bored and I wish I could leave. Because as soon as you say that, the only logical thing for you to do is to walk off stage. Now, I hope that makes sense, right? The actor has to be truthful and they have a motive. And if the motive is negative, then there's not really much compunction for them to stay and finish the scene. So we very quickly discover that in a practical sense, it's it's not helpful for actors to make negative choices, even when what's on the page looks negative. I hope this makes sense. So what's the opposite of making negative choices? Making positive choices. And when you start to examine, well, how could these characters, despite what the dialogue might seem at first glance, how could they make positive choices? You very quickly recognize the wisdom of Shurtleff's advice, which is just decide it's a love scene. Make it a love scene. Find the love in the scene. There has to be a positive reason that these two characters are engaging in this argument, that they're bothering to stay and be unpleasant to one another, right? There's something going on underneath the words that is keeping the two of them there. And let's just go for the big choice and say that that thing is love. And now let's look at the word love, right? It might be a romantic love. It might be a great scene of two characters who are truly, secretly, perhaps even secretly to themselves, in love with each other. And they're bickering and they're, kind of trash talking to each other is just their own resistance to admitting that. One of my very favorite Shakespeare plays, Much Ado About Nothing, is filled with this kind of stuff. And if you are a fan of rom-coms, it's just part and parcel of what makes a romantic comedy fun is that the couple themselves often don't know how much they like each other or are unwilling to admit it. It often takes some kind of comical intervention from their friends, as in Much Ado, or something. They're thrown together in a situation where they are forced to overcome their resistance to their own feelings, and right, it all ends happily. So this is actually quite common in actual love stories. But I also want to say that, and we're going to talk about this, that there are all kinds of love, and that love is, in a sense, just another way of expressing want and desire. It is a movement toward, it's really what we mean by a positive choice. Something is wanted, right? It's wanted, it's desired. The character, the hero of the tale, is moving toward it, is trying to accomplish something, that there's a positive intention. And every scene that we conceive of is basically happening for the sole reason that the hero wants something. The character is in the scene for a positive reason, not for a negative one. I'm going to keep my eye on the comments as we go, because if anybody's got questions about this, I definitely want to see it. This is kind of an important point, right? So we know that storytelling is about obstacles. You've all heard this, that heroes want things and obstacles and forces of opposition rise up to prevent them. And that, this is kind of how stories are shaped. And it's how individual scenes are shaped. And we have to ask ourselves as well that if our hero is going to stick around to face obstacle after obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, times 10 more, right? Because a novel length work is going to be packed with obstacles. They surely want something very much in order to endure all of that opposition, in order to get it. And so right away, we start to see that the word love is an appropriate sized word. It's not that they kind of wish they had something. It's not that they vaguely like something. They are going to go through a lot to get the thing, to accomplish the goal, whatever task we've given them. And so the wisdom of Michael Shurtleff is revealed that love is the word that includes feelings of that magnitude. And this is what it means to say that every scene is a love scene. Now, I want to look at some examples in fiction because some of you might be out there saying, well, I'm not actually writing romance. I'm writing an adventure story. I'm writing something more. Maybe it's for kids. It's, it's not, it's not an adult romance. It's something for young readers. Or maybe it's more cerebral, or it's about some ideas. Maybe you've got a different notion of what your book is about. So let me just unravel all the different kinds of ways that love turns up in the books that we know and love, and some of the books that I talk about a lot, because I like to mix it up and talk about books from different categories and for different ages, stories of different types. And I think you're about to find that love is everywhere in these stories, all kinds of love on every page. I'm going to start with a book that seems like the least likely, the least romantic, or one of the least romantic. Let's talk about Charlotte's Web, which is a book that is read by third graders, right? Kids of an age who are not reading romance stories. They're not watching rom-coms. But the friendship between Wilbur the pig and Charlotte the spider, who does remarkable things to save Wilbur's life and ultimately, in a sense, sacrifices her own life for his, is one of the great love stories you can imagine. It takes the idea of love and brings it to its full expression, because this friendship ends up with the sacrifice. Someone is willing to die for someone else. It's really remarkable, And this is a friendship that is unlikely, and it grows over time, right? They meet each other in the course of the book, and they talk about their feelings. Wilbur even asks Charlotte at one point, "Why are you doing all this for me?" I mean, they really explore the idea. And it's friendship. And it's friendship between a pig and a spider. But boy, is this love. This is big love. One of the things that happens in the book toward the end, and I don't think I'm spoiling this for anyone, is that after Charlotte's death, all of Wilbur's love for Charlotte is metamorphosed into love for her eggs, her children. She has laid a bunch of eggs before she dies. And Wilbur's friendship, his friendship love for Charlotte, now turns into the most fierce and fearless and sacrificial, passionate parental love you can imagine for these eggs. A spider's egg sac becomes the recipient of this level of devotion from Wilbur, and he's willing to do anything and sacrifice anything to save them. And he raises them like a proud papa, and when they grow up and leave him, he weeps. I mean, there is so much love expressed in the third act of Charlotte's Web, because the love of friendship is, transformed into this sort of parental love. It's so passionate and so deep, and it's really these are emotional scenes. I also want to note that there is a more traditional romantic love that blossoms in Charlotte's Web. There's a character of a young farm girl named Fern, who's the first to kind of save Wilbur's life when he's born. And she's a kid when we meet her, but over the course of this story, which takes less than a year, she starts to have an awakening of seeing boys a different way. And then there's a boy in the town that she starts to have romantic feelings for. They're kids at the cusp of, they're not boyfriend, girlfriend. They're too young for that. But all of a sudden, she's spending time with this boy and people are teasing her about it. And you just see the blossoming, right, of young love, or the capacity for young love. So this is another kind of love that is expressed fully in Charlotte's Web, which is a very short book. And then the last kind of love that I want to talk about that's expressed in Charlotte's Web is it's so profound and so beautiful, is the love of life. Because this is a book about mortality and about how fast time goes, how quickly the wheel of time spins, how quickly children grow up, um, how seasons change, right? How parents have to leave us and children have to leave us. And it's just so deep. And this love of life is expressed in these gorgeous descriptions of life on the farm and the circle of life on the farm. But it's also expressed by Wilbur's love of life. I mean, he loves being alive. He just loves it. And he loves being a pig and he loves rolling in the mud and he loves his food and he loves his sleep and he loves having a bath and he just loves all the minutia of life, which, when we boil down to it, that is what life is, right? It's just a series of everyday experiences that are gorgeous, that are just magnificent. And this love of life permeates every page of Charlotte's Web. So it's a great example. Charlotte's Web is, it's just a remarkable book. It's really a little masterpiece. And this to me is at the heart of why it is so. There's 4 profound kinds of love explored and expressed scene after scene after scene in a rather short, early middle grade book about animals on a farm. I rest my case. Lots of love. Every scene in Charlotte's Web is a love scene of some kind. Now, I want to talk about Wizard of Oz because it's such a great story to talk about and everybody knows it, but it's got other kinds of love expressed in it as well. So our main character is Dorothy. And yes, she's a girl on a farm and she's lonely and she's looking for love from her family, but they are very busy doing their chores and they can't really express their love fully. And so all of her need for love is focused on a small and, in my opinion, not terribly cute dog named Toto. And it is when Toto is threatened that the story kind of kicks off because it's the neighbor lady who comes to say, I'm going to take away Toto, which motivates Dorothy to run away from home, which kind of, kicks into action this whole sort of fantastical story where she gets swept away by a tornado and lands in this technicolor realm called Oz. So the first love that's fully expressed in The Wizard of Oz, we've got a love of a child for a pet. It's love. Love is what is at stake, right? Her longing of love for her family is there, but it's the love of her for her dog that gets this story moving, right? So then she gets to this new world and her love of her family is what drives the plot because all she wants to do is get home to them. And the entire plot is driven by her desire, what she's willing to do to get home to her family. So this is all motivated by love. Now, along the way, Dorothy's journey acquires some fellow travelers, the iconic Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion. And they've just met. But who could argue that bonds of deep love do not spring up almost instantly between these characters? So much so that at the end of the tale, when they have to say goodbye, she's got to choose. And it's a hard choice in a way between her love for her family and going back home to Kansas and saying goodbye to her new friends. And the storytellers wisely really make something of this scene when she has to say goodbye. And the Tin Man says, now I know I have a heart because it's breaking. And she throws her arms around the neck of the Scarecrow and weeping says, I think I'm going to miss you most of all. Is there any of us that haven't gotten a little misty at that scene? Like, if you have a heart like the Tin Man, I know that you felt something at that scene. It's really, really emotional. So every scene in A Wizard of Oz is in a sense a love scene. And I will even go so far as to say that the villain of the piece, the Wicked Witch of the West, is motivated by what? Her nastiness? Well, she's very unpleasant. But what motivates her to take her vengeance on Dorothy is that Dorothy, quite by accident, killed her sister. And so you could even argue that the Wicked Witch of the West is motivated in her villainy by her love for her sister. She's willing to go to incredible lengths to get her vengeance on Dorothy. And that's why. So, not a story that's a love story, but look at all the love in this story. Now I want to talk about another book that is overtly about love in terms of its theme. And I promise I am going to get to a romance. But first, I want to talk about A Wrinkle in Time, because this is a wonderful classic middle grade book about a teenage girl named Meg Marie, whose father is missing, and her family doesn't really know why. When we meet Meg, she's an awkward teenager, and her inner landscape is informed by a kind of belief, as so many people feel at that awkward age, that she is just not worthy of love. She's just, she's not attractive enough. She's not social enough. She's not, feels like an odd duck and doesn't really feel worthy of love. But her that her father is missing is the big wound in the family, because they don't exactly know when he's coming back. And when she discovers that he's in trouble, and that Meg and her younger brother and a friend of theirs named Calvin are going to go literally across the universe to rescue her father, that's what motivates it. I mean, it is the love for the father. It's what Joseph Campbell calls a father quest. Right? It's a great mythic archetype. They go to rescue the father. It is the love of the father that drives this whole plot. Now, what happens along the way is that other forms of love are introduced to the story. The love of the father gets them there, but along the way, an actual teen romance starts to happen, right, between Meg and Calvin, the teenage boy who accompanies them. And so there's a little subplot that is an actual romance plot. And then finally, her younger brother, Charles Wallace, is in terrible danger. And so her love of Charles Wallace then becomes her motivation as she's asked to rescue him. And guess what? The key to rescuing Charles Wallace turns out to be love. And not love for Charles Wallace, whom she already loves, not love for her father, whom she already loves, but love for the sort of monstrous villain of this story, not the Wicked Witch, but this symbolic force of evil that is threatening, like a black cloud, to encompass the universe. It's the enemy of love. It's a spiritual book. It's a book filled with metaphor and ideas to think about. But in terms of the storytelling, our hero is literally given the task of loving the enemy of love. And it is only because Charles Wallace's life is at stake that she is able to summon the will to do that. She's able to dig that deeply into herself to do it. So this is also a profound book about love, in which there is love of every kind on every page. There's sibling love, there's the love of the parent, there's a budding romance between two teenagers, and then finally there's this kind of transcendent spiritual love. That's all love. Those are all love scenes. All right, no talk about love would be complete. I know you know this is coming, those of you who know me well, without a little look at Jane Eyre, one of my favorite books and one of the great classic love stories, right? So Jane Eyre is, it is a beloved love story, but it starts out with us meeting our hero Jane while she's still a child, like so many children in literature. She's an unloved child at the beginning of the book. And so the hunger for love is her animating force in the beginning. And she gets out of her unloving home where she's treated very badly, and she's sent off to a school where she's treated somewhat better, but it's still not easy. And that's where she finds like a true experience of love and friendship. She meets a girl who becomes her close friend. And that's like the first movement for Jane of her first experience of love. Loving and being loved is in the context of a friendship. Alas, the friend dies. And so Jane now suffers the loss of the friendship. And then she, time passes and she goes, she's a little older and she gets a job as a governess. When she is hired as a governess, she meets the master of the house, and his name is Mr. Rochester. And this is where this book turns into a sort of a classic romance plot, because they are on the surface totally ill-suited to each other. She is young, he is older, she is poor, he is wealthy. She's the governess, he's the master of the house. Um, it's it just seems, this isn't a thing that ought to happen. And yet the two of them are so drawn to each other. And it's very stormy and it's very, filled with obstacles, as every good story should be. But along the way, we see that the desire to connect is beset by all these obstacles, these external obstacles of all the ways in which they shouldn't be looking at each other that way. And each time it basically examines like what love is. Like, should class matter when two people are drawn to each other on a deep level? Should education matter? Should money? Should age? Like, upon what is true love based? And by making these two characters so externally ill suited to each other, what is left in the story is that they just connect, that they are aligned on some very deep level. They understand each other. They vibe together well. It's a soul connection, whatever you want to call it, like whatever your vocabulary of talking about true love is. These two have it, and they've got to like work through all of the obstacles and all of the things that make it seem like they shouldn't do it. And finally, it is expressed. And then, of course, there's a tremendous external obstacle. And again, I hope I'm not spoiling this for anyone who somehow inexplicably hasn't gotten around to reading Jane Eyre yet. But it turns out that, well, let's just say Mr. Rochester has some baggage from his past. he's got some relationship mess that he hasn't cleaned up yet. And so off Jane goes, and so this love is not going to really reach its fulfillment until all kinds of obstacles have been slain, essentially, and this love can exist in the way that it really needs to. So it's a tremendous examination of love, but it incorporates so much more than romance. It looks at all of the elements of love, sort of mutual respect, shared values, telling the truth, incorporating as ever like a real spiritual connection between these two, which is sort of comes into play at the end, because only when they can really come to each other with this sort of very pure intention and all secrets have been revealed and things are on the up and up between them, it's like almost a supernatural intervention that reunites them. And so you sort of get the sense that now that they've worked through all this stuff, they can really be together. So the more obstacles that are put in their way, the more elevated the connection between them comes. It is truly a love story on every page, but it also incorporates, right, the child's need for love, a profound friendship. Jane is a governess, and she has a love for a child that she's caring for at the house, and that is also an important part of it. Her love for Mr. Rochester, which is so much more than like rom-com love. It's a really deep exploration of everything about both of them. They've got to sort through all of their stuff in order to finally be together. So spiritual love, it's all kinds of love. So that is a wonderful example, and I need to follow it with a short and silly example, because love is love is love is love. And if every scene is a love scene in a good story, I always like to talk about a wonderful picture book by the author illustrator John Klassen. Anybody who's got small children, I'm sure you know this book. It's called I Want My Hat Back. It's got very few words, wonderful illustrations, but it is a story about a bear who loves his hat. And when his hat goes missing, this bear goes on a quest to find it with intent. He will stop at nothing to find his hat. And he does find his hat in the end. He does. And there are consequences for the one who took it. So even a picture book about a bear who wants his hat back is a love story, right? And so when we sit down as writers to craft our scenes and to look at our stories, this advice from Michael Shurtleff is so profound ultimately. Can you look at every aspect of the plot that you're devising? And can you look at every relationship in the story that you're coming up with? And can you ask yourself, where is the love in this? What kind of love is being expressed in this relationship? And how is that love the driving force in this plot? In what way is it the driving force of this plot? Now, I said earlier that Charlotte's Web was an example of a like a book that's suffused with love, but like you would not put it at the top of the list of your favorite love stories, even though the book is absolutely dripping with love. But I also feel that I should note, because you all know how much I love The Hobbit, and I've heard people joke about The Hobbit that it's like the least romantic book ever written, because there's literally like there's no romance in The Hobbit, but is there love? So let's challenge ourselves to find the love in The Hobbit. And I'm going to say, of course there is. Of course there's love in The Hobbit. When we meet Bilbo, what he loves is his stuff. He loves his home. He loves his respectability. So it might not be love in a enlightened sense. It might not be love in a very well-developed sense, in a highly evolved sense, but it's the kind of love that drives a lot of people's choices, right? They love comfort. A hobbit loves comfort. And then he encounters a group of dwarves, and they want something very badly. And what they want is to reclaim their ancestral gold. And so you might say, well, this is an Ebenezer Scrooge type situation. What they love is gold. What they love is money. But that's a little incomplete, because what they truly love is their legacy, their family lineage, that this is not just gold. This is their ancestors' gold, and it was taken from them. And that's what they believe. And so they are putting in their minds, they're righting a great wrong. And so that this becomes a real, like a family love, like a story of family loyalty and restoration of a family's rightful place. And it really does drive them. This is not the easiest way to get hold of gold. If they just wanted gold, there were other ways they could have gotten it, but this gold has a history. And I point this out for those of you who might be struggling to say, well, I don't know where the love is in this, that, and the other thing, right? If you are thinking about material objects or quests for things, things are not just things, right? The things in our life have associations. And it's always useful to raise the stakes, to increase the love, if you will, in your storytelling by looking at what the things in it actually signify. What do they signify? What do they mean to your hero? In what way are they connected to one of these forms of love that we've been talking about? So the desire for the gold is very familial. It's really based on the family. All right, so they go on this long journey, and what happens along the way is a kind of love that we haven't mentioned so far, which is that it's a soldierly love forms between these guys, right? Bilbo and the dwarves. They become a band of brothers, to use the phrase. And this love is profound, and it ends up being a tremendous motivating factor in the third act of The Hobbit, where Bilbo, renounces his claim on the gold. He's over it by then, and he just wants to save the lives of his friends and is willing to sacrifice himself to do so. And that is an exploration of a kind of a very classic and very emotionally and psychologically true soldierly bond. It's a very deep feeling that forms, when people have had this kind of experience together and they've been asked to lay down their lives for each other. It is a profound kind of love. So I'm saying, that's my story and I'm sticking to it, that you can find love in The Hobbit, and it's actually not that hard to find. Now, I want to, before we wrap up, I want to share something about one of my own books, or it's my series of books called The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place. If you're one of my middle grade readers, you probably know these books. But this is also a middle grade book that, is targeted to that 8 to 12 reader. And when I first started writing them, it was my first attempt at writing middle grade. I had written some YA titles before, And so I knew that the YA titles always had a love story in them. I mean, they were tended to always be sort of important in YA. They included a love interest for the main character, but I wasn't planning on doing it because now I was writing middle grade, and my premise was about a teenage governess who was taking care of 3 children. The children had been raised by wolves, and all kinds of complexities ensued. There was a lot of comedy in it. So sort of the last thing I was thinking was there was going to be a romance plot. But I had the opportunity before the first book in the series came out to share the book in an advanced reader format with a group of really passionate young readers. And they were like beta readers, right? They read the book before it had come out, and my publisher sent me to do an event with them, and they were fantastic and full of questions. They had little sticky notes. The books had sticky notes up and down the sides because they had all marked their favorite places and had marked the questions they wanted to ask me. It was such a great experience. But near the end of this event, a bunch of the girls came up to me and they said, "We have one question that we haven't asked you yet." And I said, "Oh, well, what is it? Let me answer." And they said, "Is Penelope going to get a boyfriend?" Now, Penelope Lumley's the main character, and she's 15 years old. This is Victorian England, so that's old enough to be a governess. And I was like, "Will Penelope have a boyfriend?" And they're like, "Yes, is she going to get a boyfriend?" And I was like, "Do you want Penelope to have a boyfriend?" And they were like, "Oh, yes, we really do want Penelope to have a boyfriend." And I went home from that event and I really thought about it because I felt that they had taught me something about the middle grade reader that I didn't know, which is that they are not at all oblivious to romance. We live in a world in which romance is just part of the culture, and everybody knows about it. And it's perfectly okay, I discovered, to introduce a romantic plot in a middle grade novel that's age appropriate. And I thank those kids to this very day because those of you who've read the series know that they're not in book 1, because I didn't actually get this fantastic dose of mentor guidance from these kids until book 1 was already written. But starting in book 2, there is a love interest introduced into the series, and Penelope does in fact end up with a boyfriend. And it's books 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all make a really, really good use of this idea. It would not be the same series had I not had that conversation with those kids. So sort of no matter what you're writing, there's a way to let love in. Like, let love in the windows, my friends. Let it in. Not just on Valentine's Day, but every day. It's so fantastic. So let me wrap up my comments, and then I'm going to go look over at the questions because I see some folks are posting and I really want to address what's on your mind. What I want you to take away from this talk about making every scene a love scene is, first of all, you must let your hero make positive choices, not negative ones. Don't run your hero through scene after scene in which they are bored, sleepy, passive, not wanting to be there, reluctant, dragged reluctantly into situations. That's not storytelling. Your hero needs a positive reason to be in every scene. And love is the most positive choice you can make. And it doesn't have to be romance. It can be friendship. It can be the love of a parent for a child, the love of a child for a parent, the love of a child for the siblings, the love of the child for a pet, right? It can be a romantic love. It can be, soldierly love, this kind of love of colleagues. It can be spiritual love. It can be all kinds of love, all kinds of love. And this is the positive choice that actually motivates active storytelling. And so many of you know, because you've heard me say it and you've heard other people say it, that a passive hero is not going to work at the center of a story. What activates a hero in a positive way? It's love. So find it, put it in every corner of your storytelling. Okay. I can't wait to see what you do with that advice, and really look forward to hearing what you think about it. So if you've got to bounce now, please leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, leave your thoughts in the comments. We'll keep the conversation going. All right. Now, let me look at the comments from the folks who are here live. And let's see. All right. First of all, glad that Anne is here in order to get this tip about a valuable book about auditioning. Her teen son wants to get involved in the local theater, but he needs to learn how to audition. Yeah, I recommend the book, Anne. It's a classic. This is a book that was given to me when I was a teenager, and it is still a top-selling book, a very well-regarded book about how to audition. All right. Now, Jaren has an intriguing question here. Jaren, I'm going to bring this up. And Jaren asks, could one of your character steps toward the object of their desire be the act of letting go of said object? Interesting. So that feels to me, Jaren, like a question about sacrifice. And the kind of sacrifice that you're talking about serves as the basis for some great storytelling. And in fact, one of my favorite scenes from another one of my favorite movies, Casablanca, involves the hero sacrificing the woman he loves, essentially saying goodbye to her, letting her go in order to embrace a different kind of love. Those of you who know Casablanca know the scene I'm talking about, where the character of Rick, played by Humphrey Bogart, is, after finally being reunited with the woman who was the great love of his life, realizes that their love is fulfilled. He loves her, she loves him. It is written. No one can ever take that away from him. As he says, we'll always have Paris. But now something else, another kind of love, is going to take priority, and that is the love of freedom and patriotic love. And he is going to sacrifice the relationship so he can join in the fight against the Nazis. It's a World War II story, right? And so you see the interplay of different forms of love, but it's a positive beating out a positive. It's right. It's a struggle between a great love and a different great love. And whenever you've got a story like Casablanca that is so timelessly effective, like that movie will never not be a classic romance. It's because it's pitting these kinds of positive motives against other positive motives. It's just fantastic. It's deeply rewarding. So I'm really glad you asked that, Jaren, because that is another powerful example of how we can deploy the idea of love and all the different kinds of love in a story. Great question. Anne brings up another wonderful example, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And as she says quite rightly, the stakes come from the monster desiring love and not being able to find it. How true that is when people are deprived of love. This is truly often at the root of a lot of what ends up looking like villainy on the page. And it raises the question, Anne, which I think is terrific, about how we conceive of the forces of opposition in our storytelling. When we want there to be, quote unquote, bad guys or a villain, it's still important to say, well, where is the love in this character? Is it a Wicked Witch of the West who loves her sister, the Wicked Witch of the East, so much that she's willing to do anything to extract vengeance, right? Let's imagine that there's love everywhere and find it, because what we've done then is we've given our antagonist a positive motive too. They're operating from a place of a positive choice. So now you've got energy meeting energy that's motivated with this kind of highest form of positive stakes. And that is going to make for some fantastic storytelling. We have a really nice comment. Forgive me for not knowing who this is. Facebook user. When I go over to Facebook, I'll find out who said this. But Facebook user says, it's so helpful. Looking at love as motivation seems even deeper than pain as motivation. Love is a deeper level than the pain. Oh, that's so wise and so nice. What a great comment. I do think that when we are trying to write active heroes, positive choices will ultimately be more constantly renewable than avoiding choices, like avoidant choices. Avoiding pain is a choice, right? But seeking love is a choice. You can say my choice is to avoid pain, but then once the pain is gone, the motivation is gone, right? But a character who's motivated by love, when that motivation is endlessly renewable, right? It's really something to think about. And I'm going to bring up Anne has, I just read this, Anne, but you asked the question that we were sort of just looking at, right? Anne asks, would you say that loves that motivate the shadow or villain to helpful to consider too? Right. We just talked about this a little bit with the Wicked Witch. It's absolutely. I mean, this is how we can motivate the whole world of our storytelling, right? We can give complex motivations to all of it. Um, in the Path of the Storyteller program, I often invite my students to read a short story by Kipling called Rikki Tikki Tavi. It's a classic short story. And the hero of the tale, as it's written, is a mongoose named Rikki Tikki Tavi. And the villain, and I say this in big air quotes, right? The villain of the tale, or Ricky's antagonist, is a cobra, a family of cobras, I should say, because it's a couple, an adult female and male cobra. And what we find out in the end, it has a great third act twist, as every good story does, is that even though Ricky succeeds in killing one of the cobras, he still has to kill the other. But then he discovers that a nest of eggs has already been laid. And so now he's got a bigger task. But what we find at the end of the story, of course, is that it's very hard to blame a mama cobra for doing whatever it takes to protect a nest of her eggs. It's hard to blame her for that. She is motivated by love. And so we end up in the end of a really well structured tale like Rikki Tikki Tavi, is that we have a hero and an antagonist who are both equally motivated by an equally sound reason. Ricky is willing to do whatever it takes to protect his family, which are, now the human family that lives in this garden that he's kind of taken over. But the mama cobra is motivated for the survival of her family as well. And this is powerful storytelling. It's not two-dimensional. It's really runs deep, because we may root for the mongoose, which Kipling kind of positions us to do by making him the hero of the story. But it would be hard to argue that the mongoose's motive was really any different than the cobra's. And this is why a story hangs around for hundreds of years. It's got that kind of richness in its conception. I absolutely agree with Anne's comment that looking for the love that motivates the shadow or the villain are very helpful. And she uses the word shadow in her question. And this, to me, is also one of the things that makes a villain not just a bad guy, but a real shadow archetype. When you see those two characters gazing at each other, yeah, they're on opposite sides of this war, but they're fighting with the same degree of passion, sacrifice, and bravery for the exact same motive. I'm saving my family, you're saving your family. Circumstances put us on the opposite sides, but we can look each other almost as if looking in the mirror. And that's what gives a shadow archetype its richness. It's a lot more interesting than just a henchman, right? Or just some kind of generic bad guy. So we should always be seeking this richness in our storytelling. Wonderful questions, gang. Thank you so much for showing up live. I really, really appreciate it. I hope this talk has been of benefit. I love you all. Eat some chocolate. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy writing.